an ad can be considered a big TV production, but an ad can also be considered an Instagram reel. It can also be considered a branded content, 7-minute long form piece made for a brand, right? It can also be considered an interactive experience on a website. It can also be considered an on-ground activation. So what an ad is has blown up so much.
Right. It's become its own thing.
It's become its own thing, which is exciting. Which is exciting. But I think the problem is that there are too many choices.
So, Aditya, welcome to Real Voice Podcast.
Thank you.
This is the first time we're formally working on something together.
Yeah.
But obviously, like I said, I've heard so much about you through my friends and about your work at Shebang. And I'm very happy that you're here for this conversation.
Thank you.
I think one of the biggest moments that I really felt like we should have you as a guest was when I heard that you became an NCD in 7 years of joining Shebang, right? Let's start there. 7 years. How did it begin, and what led you to it?
Oh man, it's quite a story. I think I could have honestly never seen it coming.
Okay.
I joined Shebang at a time where I just wanted to do fun things, and I think our first couple of years in Shebang, that was our only informal motto, if you want to call it, make cool shit. That was the thing. Like, that was our internal code, which was like, just do fun shit. And when I got in, I was like, because I was before that I was in college. I was interning in a couple of the big places. I had seen what the huge advertising conglomerate life looks like, and no part of that was glamorous to me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It just felt like it was a very corporate sort of a setup, and there was a lot of unnecessary politics and a lot of stuff that deterred you from the work.
Right.
And just when you're starting off your career, that's the last thing you want to do.
Exactly.
You want to do the work. You want to keep your head down, do the work. You don't want to get into all of that.
Yeah.
So I was very clear that I wanted to join a place that was a small pond.
Got it. So you knew that from the beginning.
I knew that from the beginning. It was a very conscious call because I was, like I said, the places I was interning in, there was another place that I was also working part-time with, and I had offers from them. And in fact, one of my professors in college happened to be like a key accounts head in one of those agencies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he was really pushing for me, and he was like, bro, what are you doing? Where are you going? What is this place? Naturally, it was our first year. We really hadn't hit the mark yet. There was, naturally, right? It was early days. So, right off the back, you couldn't tell that this was going to be a promising place.
Got it. Okay.
And this is where I think things get intuitive because the Shebang had actually come to my college for a campus sort of recruitment sort of thing. And I love the energy of the people who came and presented. It was, the work may not have been the best, but the passion was infectious.
That's sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, that was that. And I was like, I need to go down there and see what it's like. And I went there for an interview. I met a couple of people, and I said, I almost prophesized that it's a matter of time. This place, and obviously it didn't come from a place of, I am going to be able to do anything here.
Right.
I was like, I'm surrounded by such interesting people. It's a matter of time before they do something amazing. And I want to be in a place where that's happening.
And boy, you were right, huh?
Yeah. And even if it was just as a witness, it just as a, and that bet paid off. It was really, it was truly that. Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that. And speaking of which, right, you had an intuitive sense that this will pay off in the long run, and it did, right?
Yeah.
But then going back to your, what was propelling you apart from the company?
Yeah.
What was it? The love for storytelling? Was it the love for advertising? What was it?
I think massively a love for storytelling, definitely, but also a newfound love for advertising.
Oh, wow.
So, cut to 2 years before Shebang, I didn't even know that advertising is a potential career opportunity for me.
Got it.
I mean, it was not in even in my consideration set.
Sorry, just to understand this. This was before you, which year was this?
2 years prior to joining Shebang.
Yeah, and this was after you started interning at these other agencies?
No, so I had just before maybe I had started interning.
Okay.
I had done. I remember actually I did one internship. I won't mention the name of the place, but
Yeah, don't check LinkedIn. You won't find it.
God, I was like, after that internship, I almost left the prospect of thinking about this as a potential industry for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was that bad. I was like, no, this is, and it's also, so, I mean, not all down to that place. It was also the kind of work. So it was, I think the year was 2011, 2012, early years of digital advertising, or what you would call internet advertising. And at that time, it was just a lot of like contest mongering and just like a lot of like these social contests and stuff like that. I was just like, what am I doing? What is I'm writing to people and I'm telling them take part in this and you'll get a Tata Indica. And I was like,
oh, wow.
yeah. How are we doing this? I can't be doing this.
I used to think those contests are scams. Please tell me. Let's bust this myth.
Some human being like me replying to that. Say, I'm sorry, one templatized email. I'm so sorry, you're not going to make it.
Oh,
yeah.
Did that go to all the participants?
I mean, so I almost gave up on it, but then so accidentally I found this course, and it was meant to be a bridge course. I won't get into the story, but I was actually meant to use it just to kind of while away my time while I thought of doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
And which was in a course which was an MA, and the Mumbai University had just come up with it that year. They were piloting that program, which was an MA in entertainment, media, and advertising. And before this, I had no background in the world of media, entertainment, or advertising at all, because I did my BA in Xavier's before that, which was a double major in economics and psychology.
Economics and psychology. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was my world. So this was all new to me.
Right.
And very quickly I fell in love. I was like, it was like I was like a kid in a candy store.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. So, and it's like the right influences, right? So I remember one of my professors, the same person I referred to, shout out if he's watching. This guy called Aditya in Kayalakal. He was sort of a big inspiration because he pulled up some very interesting ads and started breaking those down.
Okay.
And
When you say breaking those down, what do you mean?
in terms of, so I'll give you an example because I remember this very distinctly. This one ad that he had shown us. It was an ad for Chrysler. And it was a Super Bowl commercial, which is obviously in America a big thing at the time. I didn't know anything. So what is Super Bowl? How big is that or whatever. So this was an ad that was played in the mid-time of the Super Bowl.
Right.
Halftime. And the ad goes, this is halftime America. Okay, and that's the whole hook line of the ad, and this is the premise of the ad. The context was, so the ad was from 2008, just the global recession had happened, and 2008 or 2009, that period.
Yeah.
And the ad referred to how this was a halftime in the game, but also it was a halftime for the country because the first half had gone badly.
Got it.
Recession had hit. This was Chrysler, so they were largely referring to Detroit, the motor city, how things were bad, jobs in manufacturing, just the whole atmosphere was of despair and anguish and all of that. And, but just like in a sports game, things can change in the second half, right? And Clint Eastwood was the guy who was narrating it. It was,
wow.
you can only imagine what that's like, right?
Yeah.
And I remember there was a line, something to the effect of, and America is not going to be knocked off with one punch. And when we do get up, you'll hear the roar of our engines.
Wow.
And it was just this, it was like, yeah, halftime America.
That's inspiring.
And our second half is about to begin.
Amazing.
It was like, oh my God. It gave me chills. And I was like, I'm not even American. I
Right.
have no context. I didn't live through the global recession.
Mm-hmm.
But the power of that story,
Yep.
and everyone's been through that moment in time,
Yep.
right? Where you're like, okay, things are down and out, but there's always the second half.
Yeah.
And that was so inspiring because in that moment I realized that wasn't just advertising.
Uh-huh.
That was like a wake up call for the country. So
Wow.
right, because
Yeah.
sure, it was by Chrysler.
Yep.
Maybe there was one last shot of like Chrysler cars, but for the most part, it was not about selling their cars. It was about saying this is the point in time where we are as a country, and you are struggling, we are struggling too.
Uh-huh.
But we'll get through another day.
Yeah, man. And that's pretty cool, right? Like I think it taps into a raw emotion, right? When the entire country and even the world is just reeling from such major crisis.
Yeah.
Just having like Clint Eastwood's voice
Yeah.
telling you like it's gonna be okay, right? I think that's what I think that taps in, right? It boils down to the storytelling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was like, if I had the money, I'm buying a Chrysler car tomorrow. But yeah, I think it was, it showed me, it opened my eyes to what advertising could be. Because I had a very narrow perspective on it. I
Got
had, I thought it's all about pushing product, which it partly is, but it's so much more.
Right.
It's about having a joint culture. It's about creating a shared experience. It's truly understanding your consumer at a DNA level.
Yep.
And those things kind of blew my mind. And it's just like, it's like someone who shows you something like an old classic movie, and you've just grown up on blockbusters and you're like, oh my God, this is really cinema.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what happened to me. Because he showed us a bunch of very interesting stuff. So there was another.
And this is when, like, at what point were you going through these presentations?
So like early after kind of our first year in, some of those introductory courses.
Oh, this speaks to the culture at the agency, I believe, right? Where they're inculcating these thoughts in young minds, because I think you were just out of your college.
No, so I'm saying this was all happening while I was in the course.
Oh, got you. Oh, my bad. Okay, got
So
it.
this was happening while I was in the course, and the course kind of made it very clear to me that my life needs to be this.
Right.
Because like I said, before I did the course, I had very different aspirations. I thought I'd going to do something else. I had done my BA in psychology and economics. So for a moment in time, I was thinking maybe I'd do something in consumer marketing, consumer psychology. That was the way I was headed.
Got it.
But here I was like, okay, this still has parts of that, but it also has an intrinsic storytelling part. And I was like, okay, there is a storyteller in me.
Oh, wow.
So who can possibly do something with it. Right? It was sort of a wake up call for me.
Oh, got you. Let's just hold on to that thought, right? You said it was a wake up call for you, right?
Yeah.
And your graduation was in economics, right?
Right.
And how did that shift, like, in terms of realizing that you have a storyteller in you? Like, can you trace back to your childhood as to like, oh, you always had a storyteller in you, or was it the first time you started taking it up as a profession potentially?
Got it.
Yeah.
I think two things. One is personally in my own journey, going back to my childhood, there was I think an inflection point where I started to love language.
Got it.
I till about 10 or 11, I hated language, and I hated that. But I think there was a point in time where I started falling in love with reading.
Wow. Okay.
And with that, I fell in love with language.
Nice.
And when I was at a point where I was late teens, 17, maybe almost 18, is where I started to realize. So I never, I never grew up thinking I was particularly smart. I was, and the reason that was is because I was an above average student.
That is right academically.
But
Okay.
that's interesting, right? Because academics plays into your identity when you're growing up, right?
Sure, it does. Yeah.
You think, okay, your report card is who you are,
Right.
right? I was that person. I was like, okay, theek hai, I'll above average, ye hai.
Got it. So you kind of internalize
I internalized
Okay,
it,
got it.
right?
Okay.
Then there came a point when I was about 16 years old, where I started to realize that language was opening up worlds for me in terms of helping me understand different human experiences.
Oh wow.
And, because sometimes the thing is, only once you have a vocabulary for something, can you, as you said, internalize it, experience it, articulate it, intellectualize it.
Yep.
Until you have the vocabulary for it, you don't. Right?
Yeah,
And
that's true.
suddenly I found myself having a vocabulary for things, even if it was intrinsic, even if it was things like my own emotions, my own feelings, my own, like a simple thing, right? Like if your vocabulary for an emotion is only sad and happy and angry,
Yeah.
your experience of the emotional spectrum is limited.
Right.
But if you understand despair as an emotion, if you understand guilt as an emotion,
Yep.
if you understand sorrow as an emotion,
Yeah.
it really changes the way you think.
Exactly. I completely agree with that.
So I think that happened for me,
Yeah.
where language made me realize that I can probe the world, like almost investigate the world better.
Yep.
And that was a turning point in my life where for the first time, I thought, okay, maybe, I am smart. I mean, smart is kind of, not smart is not sort of the wrong way to put it, but almost like I have the ability to sort of think deeply about things.
Got it.
Because
You're putting so much pressure on you, man.
But that's like your Indian student kid, right?
Yeah.
What else do you know?
For sure.
What is your parameter?
Yeah.
Right? So, and it was also like, because academics was always something that I realized very soon is not something I'm going to shine in.
Right.
So I found another area to shine, which was extracurricular activities, growing up. And I was one of those kids who was big into like debates and drama and elocution and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, that bit I got. I know I can do this.
Right.
And I know this is something, but that report card always held me back in terms of, okay, but can I take the world on, right? And so that's interesting, because it's kind of going back to your story, going back to your question on language. Stories helped influence my love for language.
Got it.
And language helped me navigate the world a little bit better.
Got it.
So I
That's
think
beautiful. Yeah.
that was one thing.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing for me was, and I didn't realize it then, and it happened, and it's only more recent realizations, is that I was surrounded by some brilliant storytellers.
Wow.
People, everything storytelling is also limited. Maybe people who not just almost experience lived stories, told them, sure, but were had a natural love for them. And I think hearing those stories somewhere in me got me excited about that. So I think that for me came a lot from my family.
Got it.
Yeah.
Do you want to take us through some of the stories?
Sure. So I think for me, one of the persons who definitely was very pivotal in that sense was my grandfather.
Got it.
So he had a very interesting both day and almost night job also. So the day job was him. He used to be a manager of a passenger service ship line.
Got it. That's cool.
Yeah, and he started his career late 40s, 50s, and obviously on a ship you meet very interesting characters. It's the arc of any cruise movie also.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he was used to meet these very interesting characters that he would tell us stories about. So one of the guys I would love hearing stories about was this obviously very infamous smuggler called Haji Mastan.
You loved hearing his stories. Go on.
And very interesting things about, and this was a guy, obviously, this was also like the dawn era of Bombay, right? The
Right.
50s, 60s. And Howard and everyone were running the whole thing. So, and obviously, because I grew up in the 90s, I didn't have any of that context. So it was almost like hearing a story out of like a mystery novel.
Right.
When someone's telling you like what is the concept of a smuggler was blowing my mind.
Yeah.
That there's someone who's actually doing this. So there was one very interesting story about how Haji Mastan used to smuggle alcohol, and my grandfather was known as a big stickler for the rules, and he was a very almost a foreboding sort of a person.
Got it.
So he had gotten a sense that this person may create a little bit of trouble, and it's my life is not going to be entirely easy. So, but either way, I think there was one very interesting interaction my grandfather had with him face to face,
Okay.
where he told him, "Look, I'm not going to let any of this fly. And if I ever see any of your smuggled goods, I'm going to make sure they're thrown out of the boat." And that's that. And it took me a while to it's several retellings of that story that got me to think of. And my grandfather always said this story with a glint in his eye. Okay, and and he was like, and then I replayed the story that he used to tell me. If and when I come across, it will be thrown.
Yeah.
So
There comes the fight frame.
if and when I am not around, you do your own business.
Right.
So that way I stick to my end of my ethics and my principles, but you can go about doing your business in that sense.
Yeah.
So how do I stay in the gray?
Yeah. And the ball's on him. Huh? The ball's on him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Man, like, we're laughing at this, but I can only imagine what your grandfather must have felt when he was across.
Yeah. So I think it was very wild in that sense, and I think he also had a life which was why early part of his career and prior to that also he like what you would call hustled and picked up very interesting kind of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that he would do was he was a theater prompter.
Theater prompter. Oh, wow.
So I guess you don't have them anymore, but back then you would have a person standing in the aisles,
Mm-hmm.
and if the actor forgets the dialogue, then you would cue it from the wings. So he would do that, and I was like, oh my god, what is going on? Or he would tell me stories about how back then he would binge. So he would go to the movie theater, sit in for like these double features and just set of movies one after the other, come back having watched 3 films.
Wow. That must have been an experience. Huh?
It was, and it's not, my friends, when their grandparents were not telling them these kind of stories. about smuggling and theater prompting.
Yep.
And whiling away their time watching some movie.
Yeah.
So I think somewhere that that played into me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he was definitely one person. For me, my mom has also been a person like that, who in the sense of her life is a story. So she's done some very interesting had some very interesting life choices. So
Okay.
she after college she did a year at TIS in the sort of her master's in social work. And then after that, she decided to spend a year in a remote village in Maharashtra.
Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
just lived there.
Just she wanted to do it.
She just wanted to do it.
Okay.
And she went and she left all of the comforts of her life in Bombay and just spent a whole year living with this small family in this village and on a farm
Right.
and living that life. And and this is at 21, 22 years old. And there she interestingly met with some a fun group of people. There was someone who was from Finland. There were a couple of people from the UK and things like that. And after that, after that 1 year, they were like, "Hey, we're going to go back home.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you come with us?" So she, on a whim, decided to go backpacking.
Amazing. Which year was this?
This would be in the 80s.
80s, and this is much before backpacking became mainstream, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
This is the early 80s.
Yeah.
And much before backpacking became a thing. Obviously, this was a time pre-liberalization. So
Right.
foreign exchange was not something that was easily available. So you really went on, I mean, a massive budget, right? And she, like the thing that we talk about, which is big now, hostel culture and stuff like that, she was living that like,
Oh, man.
yeah,
The
40
OG.
years ago. Yeah, she's the OG. She did that 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And just to spend, and she did that for 3 months. So she went on a 3-month tour across Europe.
Wow. 3 months across Europe
Yeah.
in the 80s.
In the 80s.
What are the stories? Please, let's talk about that. What did you get?
I think, that kind of stuff like stayed with me a lot. Also, like, so she came back after that, picked up a job, a year or two in, soon enough after she started working, she met my dad. And that was also a very interesting story because it's an Indian Railway romance.
Boy, this conversation keeps getting interesting. Okay, pause. You've just sped through that entire part of 3 months in Europe. Let's talk about that a bit.
Yeah.
What are the stories that your mom brought back home?
She actually very recently gave me a diary of hers
Oh, wow.
from that time. And she chronicled her experiences and more than, hey, okay, I got up this morning and I went here and I went there type of thing, to her emotions. Like, it's really like, what we would call journaling.
Mm-hmm.
Is that actually is it's not a travel diary, it's a journal. It's a travel journal.
Right.
And I just loved pouring through that because for someone who is, this is also, I think, her first trip abroad,
Mm-hmm.
right? She's never traveled out of the country before this. First trip abroad. Again, we're living in a time where, right now, even if you haven't gone out of the country, your exposure to the world is so much through the internet and television and stuff like that. You're there. She grew up in a time where that was limited.
Yep.
So that culture shock is obviously a lot. But it was also sort of very interesting in terms of her reflections and observations on life there.
Oh, really?
And one of the key themes that she talks about is how isolating a life it is there.
Wow. Do you recall any specific incident or moment?
So she talks about being called over to her friend's house and sort of staying there, and just the dynamic then, and a lot of separated families, a lot of broken homes,
Right.
a lot of kids who have really done the growing up alone.
Wow.
And that's a very different experience from one she grew up here in India, where family is such a big part.
Yeah, that's
Of and there it was really not so much. And maybe through the course of that trip, maybe she had one meal with the parents, or which is very different from. So I think those kinds of things, which were, she was also talking about whether she would ever consider moving. And she's written that after this trip, it's like she's very clear that she needs to come back home
Wow.
and make her life back in India. Because while there are many beautiful things about the West in terms of, and particularly the places she visited in Europe in terms of just history and culture and access to nature and just great air and a lot of that. When it comes to things that matter, it's a fairly lonely and isolating life.
Got it.
So I was like, wow. It's like things that someone in their early 20s to have even introspected and gone through that.
Yeah,
I think because most people, first trip abroad would be about the glitz and the glamour, and I saw this and I saw that, and oh my God, I went to this town square and I saw this 1400 castle or something. None of that. It was more on these so many deeper reflections.
Yeah. Do you inherit this from your mom?
I think I do. I really do. I would. My mom is a deep empath, and I think that the writing shows that, because the writing is not so much as I was saying about the architecture and the other surface things. It was more about people,
Right.
and that's me too. And I feel like I'm very people centric. And I take my energy from the people I'm around.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I think in that being people first is something I definitely take from her.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And now we can go back to your love story between your dad and your mom. So how did that shape up?
So that story, they both of them were working in this company which was in Ambernath.
Okay.
And so they had to take the same train every day. So it was a Dadar fast all the way to Badlapur, and I think they got off at Ambernath.
And this was like late 80s, 90s?
This would have been late 80s, correct? Late 80s. And so 707, I think, was the train.
Oh, you remember
Yeah,
that?
where they would both get in.
Oh, wow.
And, so the thing was that obviously they were working in the same company, so they knew each other, but very different departments. My mom was working with the HR department. My dad is a chemist, so he was working in the labs.
Right.
And he was so working with the R&D sort of team. Both really had nothing to do with each other at the workplace. Right. So the only thing was one common destination. And I think over the course of time, they just got talking on the platform, waiting for the train. And obviously, that's happening every day. And I think my mom keeps saying that the moment my dad really won her over was when she moved from the ladies' compartment to the gentlemen's compartment. And they started not just talking in the platform,
On the
but they
train.
started talking on the train
Oh, man. That's
all the way. But it's a long, like about an hour plus journey. So lots to talk about, lots to catch up about. So they made a lot of friends. A lot of the people in the train were at their wedding. Yeah.
That's a love story right there, like a real
compartment. So they had a fixed compartment. They had fixed seats in the train. This is really the story of like you hear this stuff in movies.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
and it's so unfortunate. I think such stories are only gonna get rarer now.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting because story for me also, because both of them are from very different walks of life culturally, ethnicity as well as religion. So their worlds are very different, and the local train is that one place where everyone comes together, right? And even that's true even today.
Right.
The next person, you don't know who the next person beside you is, and that's the beauty of it. And I think what's happening more so in Bombay, even more now, 30 years or 40 years later, is that it's becoming incredibly cliquey, right? Your social circles are becoming people that look and feel and seem like you.
Oh, that's so true. Like, yeah, that's becoming a thing. Okay.
Yeah. So I think to have spaces where you come across people from everywhere, different educational backgrounds, SES, ethnicity, parts of the country, I think that's to be treasured.
Yeah, that's so true. We gotta embrace more diversity.
More diversity. So for them, it was really, I think, because it's not just a love story; it's a love story across religions, which in India is a big thing. It's a big thing.
Yeah, no kidding there.
So she being Roman Catholic from Kerala, my dad is Maharashtrian. It was not easy. I think getting the unions of the family and things like that. Particularly more so from my grandfather's side. So which is surprising for me then, because I saw a very different person. But that just goes to show how much it was 4 years before I was born, and in that period in time, my mom had won them over so much.
Wow.
And I remember, so I just, like, when we were close to the time my grandfather was dying, he was in hospital for a surgery, and there was a point where the nurse asks my mom, "Who are you? How are you related to this man?" And she says, "I'm his daughter-in-law," and he corrects and says, "My daughter."
Oh wow.
And I think I'd never forget that scene. I think she also welled up, and it was like, it's one of those things, because I never grew up seeing an in-law relationship between them. They were always at each other, and they, both of them, loved passionately, loved intensely. So they were also very vocal people. So they'd have their fights. They'd be just as quick to make up. My dad's a little bit more of a, like my grandmom, a little bit more on the sober, stays in the shadows kind of person.
Gone.
But both my grandfather and my mom love the spotlight. So yeah,
And you grew up with this.
I grew up with that, so I think that played into it. Yeah.
That's freaking cool, man. Dude, like, I think there are so many stories here. I just love the fact that between us, like, because we're talking about the first time and just hearing some of these stories, I think I know your family now. And it kind of like brings this common ground, right? I want to understand, how does this play out in your job, right? Obviously, like, in terms of when you're working with different brands, you're also telling stories. How does your, love for language, your childhood surrounded by stories like these, play in, like, in your job?
So I think in two ways. One is just an inherent passion for storytelling. I think that's what I've inherited from my family. Another very crucial part of our job is what we call packaging.
Packaging, got it.
Packaging, right?
Got it.
It's like, okay, you got a story to tell, but how are you? There are a million ways you can tell a story, right? How are you going to treat that story? How are you going to, what clothes are you going to give that story, right? So for that, I feel like, the influences that you have, and I don't mean just in terms of being surrounded by other stories, but in terms of, like, watching, reading, experiencing different parts of culture has a major part to play in that. So I think for me, one of the big things, which even today is a big source of inspiration, is our movies, right? And the way I really get into the thick of things in terms of breaking down a movie and just borrowing a lot of that into my work with advertising also. Funnily and interestingly enough, one of the person who kind of nudged me along, well, a lot of these things are accidental, right?
Got it.
I didn't grow up necessarily a movie lover. It was okay. Also, it's the time, right? So we grew up where there was no OTT or there was none of that. So whatever, the movie that you saw was the odd movie that came on cable television. Maybe going to the movies was an experience. So, like, it was a scene. Like, I probably watched like 2 movies a year growing up. It was a big deal. So I think I hadn't seen enough to have fallen in love with them. And then there was one summer that changed it all.
Really? Okay.
Where I was, I had gone to the US And my aunt has married an American who owns a drive-in theater.
Oh, wow.
So talking about a love for the movies, I mean, so it's a very interesting story. So the drive-in theater is in his childhood town where he grew up. And he had that very personal experience of loving the movies because his grandparents would take him for the movies there. And one fine day, he came across that the property, because drive-in theaters in general in the US are dwindling. You know, it's not something that's as popular as it used to be back in the day. And the whole property was for sale. And he was like, and they were going to turn it into something else. And he said, no, I've got to safeguard this. This is a pivotal part of American culture.
Drive-in theaters.
Drive-in theaters.
You've all seen them in the garden.
Yeah. And so he bought that and he saved that theater. And that just goes to show, something visceral in terms of a memory you have from the childhood, but also how movies have impacted you and pushed you and into the person you are, into the ways of thinking and stuff like that. So I think that summer when I went there, he introduced me to some classics and some phenomenal movies. And I remember day after day, we would sit and watch these movies.
Yeah. Anyone specific you recall?
Oh my God. So everything from something as frivolous as The Princess Bride, which is an American classic, but all for it's absolutely ridiculous, that movie, right? And my aunt was just rolling her eyes, sitting in the corner, being like, what is this nonsense? But I just absolutely, and my uncle loved it, and I also absolutely loved it. To something as deep as Green Mile.
Okay.
Or Shawshank Redemption.
Amazing.
Like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, and again, it's a crucial, when you see stuff, right? Like I was just finished my 10 standard exams. I was in that mode, and you're a late teen. It's a very influential time. And I think suddenly I realized that there's so much that movies can do in terms of helping you understand your own experience or things.
Yeah, that's so true.
So that became a big thing for me, and I think till today that guides me in terms of how I treat my own work. But it's not just movies. I say that it's today for advertising. You need to be a student of the world, right? So you will rarely do well in advertising if all you do is watch ads.
Yeah, student of the world is such a very beautiful phrase.
Yeah.
Yeah, well put. Okay.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people who have a brilliant reference game with advertising, and that's good. And it's a critical first step. Know your history, because another tragedy with our times is a lot of people who get into the business don't know about what's already happened.
Right.
And the best, we're unfortunately not living in the golden era of advertising. The golden era of advertising happened 50 years ago. So learn that. Learn what water they were drinking, what they were doing, what their lives were about, what work they did is important.
Can we just talk about this a bit more? You said that I'm not from the advertising level, so I don't understand this as much, but what do you mean the golden era for ads is 50 years behind us?
So I think what is considered globally as a time where advertising was at its peak was a world post-television. So as soon as television came, it was a new medium to explore. And some of the stuff that came out then was absolutely brilliant.
Got it.
And it kind of in parallel with that, while print had been around for some time, even that stuff that some of the great work that happened in the 60s and 70s it's just phenomenal in terms of craft. Because you had only fewer mediums to focus on.
Right.
If you had to make an ad, there are 3 places you make an ad. A, you make a billboard. B, you make an ad for television. 3, you make a print ad.
Got it.
It's simple, right? It's 3 boxes. You work on those 3 boxes. Today, there are a million boxes.
Right.
That's a part of the problem.
Oh,
right?
wow. Okay.
Because there are a million boxes, craft on either of those boxes is not at its optimum.
Right.
You can make an ad can be considered a big TV production, But an ad can also be considered in an Instagram reel. It can also be considered a branded content, 7-minute long form piece made
Right.
for a brand, right? It can also be considered an interactive experience on a website. It can also be considered an on-ground activation. So what an ad is has blown up so much.
Right. It's become its own thing.
It's become its own thing, which is exciting, But I think the problem is that there are too many choices, and it's that diversity paradox, right? Because there are a million things you can do, no one is doing it as well as they can.
Got it. Yeah, it almost sounds like there's this thing that we say that golden era of television is behind us, even though more and more stories are being told.
Right.
It's difficult to recreate the experiences that we had in the 2000s, right? In
Right.
terms of television. That's really fascinating. So, in terms of your growth, as a creative strategist to now being an NCD,
Right.
this kind of overlaps with the digital revolution that was happening in India in terms of Jio coming in with those SIM cards and everybody getting access to internet.
Yeah.
How did that change your working, in terms of working with brands? Because you're working with a new territory altogether, right?
Absolutely. So it's very interesting because a couple of years ago, I was working on a 5-year anniversary video for Jio. It's one of our clients, and it's interesting because we started around the same time that company started, right, as an agency. So we've really seen that whole digital explosion. And while we were working on that story, what that story spoke about is just the evolution of the internet, right? And going back to when we grew up, right? We were our first touch points with the internet, where everything from that dial-up connection,
I know what you mean.
to like it's sort of, I remember it was kind of crazy where even to write an email, right? If the time it took to write an email was considered precious because you're losing that kind of because everything was time censored, right? So my mom would be like, write it on a Word document, then when you're ready, copy paste it onto the body of an email, and then only turn the connection on and send it.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
that meticulous.
That kind of scarcity mentality,
Right.
of how this is precious juice almost.
Yeah.
So now where you're like, what? I mean, router is on 365 days.
Yeah.
So I think that has been for us particularly to have grown up with and seen.
Yep.
Has been very, very crazy. And particularly more so even, the time that you referred to, which is pretty much the last 10 years, it's kind of been very crazy in terms of how much it's been democratized.
Right.
I think that's what's really changed.
Yeah, that's a perfect choice of word there.
So it's not like the internet wasn't around, because I mean, my first touch point with the internet may have been when I was like 4 or 5 years. I remember being one of those kids who was, my mom even used to send me to those computer classes.
Yeah.
Right? Like at 5 or 6 years old,
Yeah.
I was doing that. So I'm very comfortable with the internet because I grew up with the internet.
Yep.
And it's taken me only now to realize that there was a very small fraction of people in India.
That was like what, like 200, 300 million, if I'm
Possibly
best.
even lesser than that.
Yeah.
Even lesser than, way lesser than that.
Yeah.
So it is now that people are truly, and I think what's also changed was been interesting is the in point, right? Because our in point was a desktop, a PC at home.
Yeah.
In the last 10 years, a lot of the people, their first in point into the internet has been smartphones.
Correct.
Because you may not have the money to have a big device or a personal computer, laptop, whatever it is.
Yep.
But a smartphone is something that has been democratized at a price level, so much so that at least a lot of people have smartphones.
Yeah.
So that became their first kind of touch point.
Yeah, I remember Redmi was like going wild with their phones, and everybody in college around 2015, 14 had a Redmi and Jio SIM card, I don't remember the exact year, but it was around that time roughly.
Yeah.
But go on. So this is like...
So I think what was interesting is that the people who came into the fold, into the new internet culture started to define what the internet was becoming or has become today.
Yep.
Right. So if you start to see the major trends today, in terms of just like creators, whether it's on TikTok, whether it's on Reels, Share Chat, Moj, whatever it may be, it's not people like you and me who are driving that agenda. It's the new era of internet creators who are bringing a new language to internet expression.
Oh, that's interesting.
Absolutely new language, right? Because that language is not like people who are on Reddit or talking about some sort of controversy theory, or someone who's making a podcast about talking about some crazy stuff. This is or going into speaking about gaming culture, or those are typical things, right? What we know of internet culture when we were growing up is flashes on Twitter, YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube was and what the nonsense that used to happen on YouTube.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've seen social media come to life.
Yep.
And we've all done those things where we've sent people messages on walls and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think from Orkut to Facebook. I think before we had MySpace and Facebook, and now we have so many others.
So many others.
Yeah.
And the kinds of things that were being shared, talked about, were from a very, very, very niche pop culture.
Right.
Right? A lot of it was Americanized. So the stuff we were sharing was American music, movies, this kind of stuff. Today, there's a very Indian and local flavor to the internet.
Yep.
Because people are finally giving expression to Indian experiences.
That's so true. That's so well put, actually.
So, and because the voices are coming from the heartland of the country. So, they are talking about things that are unique to them.
Yep.
And I think that's very nice and that's very refreshing. And sure, I mean, some of it may be things a lot of people can't relate to, but there's a reason they're blowing up, right? And however trivial it may be, even if it's a dance reel or even if it's some badly edited transition video, it is who they are and they're being themselves. And that's liberating.
It is, right? Isn't it? And now that brings me to a particular, question, which is, when you're sitting in Bombay or Bangalore and working through with your brands in terms of figuring out what they should do, how does this exposure to this new world through the internet play in? Like, how are you able to tap into that?
I think it's, I'm not going to lie, it's hard. I'll tell you why it's hard. The reason it's hard is because our offices are also in places that where the heartland of the country doesn't reside.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
We're talking about the three big metros is where we're Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore.
Right.
So what helped a little bit was actually the pandemic. Because suddenly we found ourselves hiring people not just from where our physical offices were, but from the most remotest corners of the country. Right? So suddenly you had someone from Assam and Siliguri and Shillong and, and that was beautiful. And I think that diversity really added to things, and it gave a new perspective. It gave a new way of looking at life. So I think one and very critical, not just for us, but for any agency today, is to have people who have lived those experiences, right? There's only so much you can do with the second-hand influences. Sure, someone can say, okay, I'll go and do a deep dive into ShareChat and Moj and understand what creators from Lucknow are doing, and maybe I'll get a sense of. But unless if you are from Lucknow only, then you know what people in Lucknow are like, right?
Yeah.
So I think we can do our best with second-hand information, but it's very crucial to have or be surrounded by people that also actually come from those areas. And if not your own employees, then at least in terms of research, in terms of consumer emotions.
Wow. This is so beautiful. It's almost poetic because we just had another recording right here with another person and she was talking about inclusivity.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we discussed was our biases around especially for me personally, where there was a time where I was rejecting people who couldn't speak English properly, and I'm guessing when you are hiring people from all over the place in the country, right? English may not be their strongest suit, right? So you're hiring people who bring different strengths to the table,
100%.
right? And it's so good to hear that there are so many things that they bring to the table in terms of talent, right? That's what that's what it sounds. Now, how does that play out in terms of managing a team? Like, you are now the NCT. You're pretty much setting up this culture for the middle managers doing this as well, right? So what are the challenges that you're facing in terms of getting this going?
I think the major challenge is, and this is for anyone who is in a leadership position, is how do you try to stay as close to the ground as possible, right? In terms of the foot soldiers who are actually making the action happen, right? And that is hard. It's visibly hard. I think today, just between me and an entry-level position person, there are 10 layers. It is.
Oh, wow.
It is. That is the. That's what comes with scale,
Right.
right? When you have a 1,400 company, it's the trade-off.
Yeah, Shebang has grown a lot in the
Yeah.
last 10 years.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Go on.
So I think for me, one of the things, it's a challenge. It's something that I, find myself, trying to navigate, is while I will always have the year of the 2-3 layers below me, right? Because, how do I make sure that I'm still somewhere in the line of sight?
Right.
Of the person the person who's coming with those green thumbs into, and honestly that's exciting, because for my journey also I miss that period, I really do. I am, and part of it comes also from there, because I was as a creative strategist when I joined the company at that junior level position. It can actually be very liberating because you don't know anything.
Wow.
You don't know. Let's call it for what it is. You don't know anything, and you not knowing anything is brilliant. At least in the creative industry, because you have when you're starting out, if you have limited references, then there's never a question of you drawing a box around yourself.
Right.
Right? You don't know how things are done, so you will come up with a new way to do it.
Fair.
And maybe that new way is not the most efficient way.
Yep.
And you will burn your fingers, and you learn the better way to do things. That's part of the process. But also maybe in that process, you'll come up with a new way nobody has ever thought about. And that will be pathbreaking.
Yeah, that's so true.
Right?
Yeah.
I will, and I feel like that's with, again, not just with advertising, that's with any piece of commercial art.
Got it.
A lot of filmmakers that we look up to, their early movies are just as brilliant.
That's so true.
Maybe they don't have as much finesse, and they don't have as much sort of craft from that point of view, but just the conceptually,
Yep.
they are brilliant.
Yep.
Right? Because they were more unhinged.
Yep.
And it's true with movie makers, it's true with artists, it's true, definitely very true with musicians.
That's very true.
And that's a struggle, right? As you get further and further entrenched into the system, how do you make sure that you still keep it new?
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge, right? Like keeping things fresh, because generally a more mature industry would, keep slapping your wrist if you're going off track, right? They want you to be a certain way until somebody just crops up and does something different and breaks out, and everybody wants to do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
I get that. But it's interesting. We spoke about a bunch of things here. Like you mentioned, being at an entry level and having 10 layers in between you and somebody who's at the entry level right now. Let's dial back.
Yeah.
Let's go back 7 years when you were there in that same position. Shebang, I think it just started out.
Sure.
And you were also instrumental in setting up their Bangalore office.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the challenges that, came then. And what are the moments that you recall and, you're like, oh, these are the days that made me.
I think I look back at that period of time with incredible fondness.
Okay.
It's one of the reasons is that I think we were all, as I said earlier, right? We were there to just do cool shit, right? So I think, and suddenly when I joined the company, I met like a fraternity of people who had a similar sort of passion,
Right.
and but different influences,
Got it.
which is a beautiful combination.
Amazing. Yeah.
People who are on the same page as you but come with far more exposure in other ways.
Yep.
Is a great place to be.
Yep.
So I think that was very exciting. Second thing that was very exciting was there was a lot of you're on the very ground floor of something, right? So the only place to go is up,
That's so true.
right?
Yeah.
And that is a very exciting feeling, that whatever you do is not just going to shape an identity for yourself, but it's also going to shape an identity for this company.
Right.
And I think it had a lot to do with the time I was in. And I was very lucky. It was the right time, right place. But also because it's that initial set of people, the work they do defines the work that the company does.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right?
So well put.
The voice, their own voice is the company's voice.
Correct.
And that was very exciting for me.
That's super cool
To say that, okay, this work is me, but it's also what this company can be known for, was very exciting. So I think that was what really drove me in those years of putting stuff out there and giving ourselves a little bit of that flavor. So it's very heartwarming when I meet someone and someone refers to something I've done 6-7 years ago, and they were like, oh, and we were like, you guys, Shebang, you guys first came to my notice when you all did the Raw Press ads.
Oh wow.
Right? And I was like, oh my god, I talked on that 6 years ago. What, are you serious? The fact that you remember. So I think that was very gratifying. The freedom, given a lot of freedom to do what you have to do to make things happen. And I think just that's the liberating part of just starting out. So I think that really helped. And with that, I think just having the right sort of people in the room, and a culture where everyone is intent on doing their absolute best, produces great work. Once you have great work, everything else comes. You get more clients.
Yep.
The money comes, everything comes.
Yep.
So yeah.
Are there any specific instances you recall? Because I mean, these are a lot of things that you're talking about, right? Here.
Yeah.
Are there any specific instances or moments you recall from back in the day which were like, this is ground zero level shit,
Absolutely. So one of my favorite stories is we were working on something for a particular client, and it was a weekend, and one of my colleagues calls me and is like, what are you doing? And I was sorry, because my parents are going to find out this story just right now. The thing is that so I would gone for a movie with my parents, and it was like a late night show, and I was getting back kind of home, and I was like, no, I'm just getting out of the movie. I'm going to go for dinner. But yeah, what's up? So he's like, oh, okay, we're working on these scripts. Just thought if you're free, you should come by. And I was like, it's like, oh, Sunday night. What is normal person would have thought that way, right?
Yeah.
You just wait another 8 hours and I'll be there the next morning.
Yep.
Right? But we were so excited. And I remember, so going back home, and it was my first job. I just started out, and I didn't want my parents to be like, what the hell, what are you, like, you're leaving the house at 12 in the night to go and work right now.
Yeah.
So you won't believe this, but I actually snuck out of my house.
Oh, really?
To go and do work.
Wait, why did you have to sneak out?
Because I was embarrassed to tell my parents that I want to go to office to work right now. Because I would you have heard a mouthful from my parents being like Sunday night. Well,
Oh, wow.
what is this nonsense? You've gone mad and you lost it. And I was like, I don't want to get in. I don't want to engage with that conversation.
Right. Your house is like a very strong family culture, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
But it was like, and I guess just not me, but anyone would have had that reaction.
Fair,
Which is
fair.
like, why? What is up with this? So I said, forget about it. I'll just sneak out. So I snuck out. We went to the office. It was just the five of us. Obviously, it's the middle of the night. Nobody else is there. We cracked some stuff. 5:30, 5 o'clock went done. 5:30, I sneak back home. Nobody knows anything.
5:30, yeah.
Yeah. And the next morning, I go back to work.
What time was it?
I probably went a little later that day, 11:30. But yeah. And I was like, that shit, those are the memories,
That's pretty cool, man.
That's the kind of thing of like, someone thought this is their idea of fun. On a Sunday night, going to the office, and there were so many of those stories where we would, and in those days, the key of the office used to be only with our founders. So, there are so many weekends where we have made one of the partners in the company come open the office for us. It's like that stuff.
That's beautiful.
And that you'll never forget.
I'm not going to ask you if you got overtime for it. But this is interesting, right? Like, these are the days where you were going through a massive shift, not just in terms of your career growth, but also, how digital was creeping into the world, right? And that was influencing what brands were also supposed to do in the coming years.
Yes.
Right now, where we stand, it's a different world compared to where you started.
Yeah.
In terms of the newer people that are coming in, people who are in the early 20s, who are far more aware than, say, we were at that age, who are far more exposed to different philosophies in life, even including having a very strong work culture and stuff like that, right? So, a balanced work culture. So, how does that play out in terms of your work today? Like, do you look at the younger generation and feel like, we did things better? Or do you feel like, no, these guys are doing it better in some ways? Or what is that? How is that thought process for you?
I think I don't play the comparison. I just think it's a generation that has grown up with their own unique circumstance and their own unique experiences.
Right.
And it's also the generation we are talking to. So today when us being millennials, you rarely walk into a meeting room and someone tells you, oh, our target audience is millennials. Let's face it, we are not anymore the core TG for most brands.
Yeah, we're getting old.
We're getting bloody old. Most young brands want to talk to either Gen Z and now Gen Alpha.
Gen Alpha.
Yeah. Right? So the thing is that you can't wrinkle your nose and be like, oh my God, I'm going to suddenly start decoding this Gen Z person being a millennial. There's only so much you can do. Right? So you have to appreciate and understand that is where the world is going in terms of, as you said, naturally, where the market potential is. And if that is the consumer you're talking to, then the people who are working behind the scenes also need to be that consumer.
Right.
Right. So I think from that point of view, I feel like it helps me understand, and it's new every day. Like I still feel like there's so much I get and I still don't get. So it's always good to just lean in to understand, their experience, so that we can talk to, our target consumers a little bit better.
Got it.
So I feel like I come at it from that point of view. I feel so there are, in terms of good and bad, the good I feel is that their exposure to culture has been at a level that is unprecedented.
Got it.
Unprecedented.
Is there a specific instance that you recall where this stood out for you?
I just think, not specifically one instance, but I just think generally.
Got it.
Because like I said, right, for us, I think for us, the OTT explosion has started only, when we were already in our mid-20s. Right?
Yeah.
Versus someone who is, grown up with it from their late teens
Yeah.
onwards. So I mean, that's one sort of outburst of exposure.
Yep.
But there's so much just in terms of like internet culture, in terms of more nuanced discussions and conversations in the world, right? So whether it's around things like inclusivity, whether it's about understanding gender, whether it's about just, sexual experiences or people across the spectrum, mental health. I don't think it was, we have caught up to those conversations, but we didn't grow up with those.
That's so true. That's so true. Yeah.
So I think to have people who are more in the culture now, so to speak, it kind of, it's refreshing. And I think it really helps. And that's the good part. I feel the part, and I wouldn't say not so good, but I feel this, and where more can possibly be done, is how do you actually, while it really helps to have all of these, things, how can you also hardwire yourself to the reality of where the world is right now, in terms of actually where tech is right now, in terms of what, the opportunities are. I think it's extremely important today more than ever to be skilled in multiple things. So, when I got into the thing, it didn't even strike me. I said, okay, I want to be a writer. The focus area for me is going to be to write, right? And that's, as a creative person, that's all I need. But today, as a creative person, you need to understand art. You need to understand AI.
Yeah.
You need to understand just the basics of maybe business transformation and just personalized marketing communication, and it's so much more. So I feel like the turfs that you play on are very, very important, and to understand the grammar of those is extremely important.
So when you say the turfs, you mean like the different kind of different technologies the youngsters are interacting
absolutely.
Got it.
And in some ways they are already equipped a little bit. So for example, you'll rarely meet a Gen Z person who's not edited a video in their life.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a lot of them are creators. Even if it's something as simple as making a reel on the weekend, they're doing it.
Yep.
They're cutting something. They're DJing on the side. Whatever it is, they're doing something. Right. Which is not most millennials haven't done.
That's interesting, right? And sorry, just to ask you something around that, it also boils back to the gig economy that we're in, right?
Yeah.
So many young people prefer that over having like one straightforward career and a job, right?
Right.
How does that play out in your team building exercises, right? Where if somebody comes up and tells you that, hey Aditya, I am also DJ. I work on the weekends, and I need my weekends for myself. Going back to where you were so excited to sneak out of your house to work on a script, right? Off hours, right? How does that factor in?
I think it's a very good place to be, because I feel like if you have those creative outlets outside of the work you do, it just gives you that win,
right?
But and while that's a force outside, that can also be an internal force, because you can bring some of that into your work as well. And we found some interesting case studies of that. So, for
that's interesting.
We have someone in our team who's a stand-up comic, and invariably his writing on humor can't be compared to the way most other people would write, right? And so he brings a lot of that muscle into that. Not just that, but also in terms of he's helped us reimagine the way ads can be constructed. So in fact, we did a piece for a client, which was actually a stand-up comedy show. It was like a 5-minute stand-up piece.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So, and that's obviously taking from his, as you said, weekend or post 8 p.m. life.
Right.
Similarly, we have someone in our team who is a storyteller, and he largely so narrates stories in Urdu, and Hindi.
Wow.
And that obviously that influence is very nice to bring into our work. So I think a lot of people find a way to juggle it.
Yep.
Or do interesting things with it. There's I think you and I both know Paul
Yep.
well, and Paul, along with Nilay, both are musicians.
Yep.
And recently she did a fun piece for us.
Oh, that was so cool. Yeah, that was so cool.
Those kind of things are, it's nice.
Yeah.
It's nice. Yeah. But again, I think while you're right in saying that we are in the gig economy, so probably there are more examples of it, but it's not like it never happened. Like you look back to someone like Alec Padamsee in the OG era of Indian advertising, like who can be considered like pretty much the godfather of Indian advertising. He lived two lives. He was a theater man and he was an advertising man. There's actually a very nice book called The Double Life.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah. So where even in that early era, there were people who always found ways to do things for themselves.
Right.
And there's so many, and because of that, I think some people may have dabbled in the same time. Some people have naturally segued into another thing. Balki, for example, advertising, now filmmaker. So many such people.
Yeah, so many people are like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. No, for sure. And one of the things that you mentioned was tech, right? And different turfs. We are also at another revolution, so to speak, after the internet or the digital revolution, right? Which is the AI.
Yeah.
And I'm aware that Shebang identifies as a tech company and they're doing a lot of work there. How does that play into your day-to-day work, which is so creative and so human-led, so to speak?
I think it's a fun frontier because one of the things that AI does, gives you a good initial working draft to start with. Right. So today, and I think with most things, to get something to a certain kind of level requires a lot of iterations, right? And what AI can potentially do is help you skip the first couple of iterations. And say, okay, let's just bring the conversation level up, right? If you were going to start from the ground, let's just bring it up till here.
So you have a head start.
You have a massive head start.
Got it.
You still have to do a lot yourself, but the foundation is really set up for you.
That's
and that's with whether it's with generative art in a major way, and we've been dabbling with that. It's still a lot of the stuff that we put out is AI. We don't say AI made, AI assisted. Because we'll put it into a DALL-E or a Midjourney and things like that, but still have our graphic designers work on it.
Got it.
And I think there's a lot of that. If you use that well, because you can get lazy with it.
Right.
There's a lot of the output at an initial level is not bad. So most people are like, okay, let's just use that.
Yeah.
But if you really care about craft, you can exploit it brilliantly.
Right.
So there's a very interesting video I was watching the other day on a guy who was working on this generative art piece, and he explains an 8-hour workflow of how he kind of worked alongside the model, and sort of kept throwing prompts into it, kept getting it out, kept building on it, going back and forth. And that was beautiful because you could, at the end of it, you could see that first draft that came out versus what he actually created, which was phenomenal.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And this was for a brand, or
no, this was just something he did for fun. So this guy he's created a sort of a virtual avatar of himself.
Got it.
And he puts those avatars in fun situations. So one of the scenarios that he made up was where he is boxing with Muhammad Ali.
Wow.
And It was very interesting because what the model did was, okay, he had that avatar, he put Muhammad Ali, he put all that, so it created that base template. But then it let him focus more so on the lighting, the exact muscle definition of Muhammad Ali. Some of the things generative art is still not able to get right, like hands.
Yep.
You must have seen that
Yeah.
thing. So sharpening on those, making sure the angle, if he was punching this way, what would his face look like? So I think that's where the beauty is.
Yeah, working on the details.
Working on exactly. I think that's a very good point. What generative art has been able to do is let you skip to the part where you can just jump into the details.
Right.
Most of the time, we don't have time for the details.
Yeah, that's so true. That's where it takes the most time.
And because we have no time for the details, the work is mediocre. So hopefully, I'm hoping that now that we have this additional time, if we can use that additional time for the details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's pretty cool. So the quality of craft is then expected to still go up. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Then what happens when you're across different marketing heads and owners of different companies pitching these ideas to them, right?
Yeah.
You're disclosing that these assets are AI assisted, right?
Yes.
But how do they respond? I assume they are of a different age group.
Yeah.
So how do they respond?
So I think for most part they respond fairly positively because AI is the buzzword out there.
That's true, yeah.
So even if they are from a significantly different generation, I think everyone wants to play with a new toy. So I very rarely have I found people fighting back. I think the real question is how many want to go deeper with it. Right. So I remember I'm sitting down with a client very recently and they were like, hey, we should do this with AI, blah, blah, blah. I said, fantastic, great, we can. But what is your story with AI? And I think the client also did a double take because they were like, oh, I really hadn't gone there. So we're living in a time where every Tom, Dick and Harry is going to use AI. Right. So, I mean, if you're doing it because it's going to give you a unique edge or like, maybe that'll be for another month or two. But after that, it's everyone is going to do the same thing. So that whole thing of I was there first is going to get very stale. Then you need a deeper narrative with AI as to what is it, why are you using AI, how is it adding to your consumer experience, to your brand storytelling, to who you are, your identity. I think that's something that more people in the boardroom and I would say people with grey hair need to discuss significantly because those aren't questions about technology. They are larger questions on brand building.
Right.
And
I promise I discuss those.
Oh yeah.
Good one, dude. I appreciate this. I want to end this podcast and this conversation with one last question.
Sure.
As someone who's grown in this fast-changing world, rapidly growing world,
right,
and you've evolved through different forms of communication, and now we are still in another transition. What is it that you want to convey to the younger generation? Somebody who's just getting out of college, or probably are in college, or want to explore the world of advertising. What would you want to give them as one piece of advice? So I would say just throw back to two things I already said. One was be students of the world, because I think that is critical today in terms of making sure that you're surrounded with different sort of influences is extremely important, and they can be whatever you choose to make them. Got it.
So A is that. B is get into, so while most of us are on the softer side of the storytelling experience in terms of imagining and maybe writing, can we push ourselves to also doing?
Oh wow.
Right. Okay. So you thought of a video idea, shoot it. Don't just write the script. Right. Edit it. Try making a music scratch, right? Do those things, because what happens is, and at any point in time, we'll always work with domain experts. So nobody's expecting you, that, suddenly you know to compose a little bit of music, so you're expected to do that on the next piece. Not at all.
Right.
You'll still be working with a music composer. But going back to that point on language, you'll have a shared language.
Right. You just know the basics, right?
You know the basics, you know how to communicate with the music composer better. You know how to give a brief to a lyricist better.
Yep.
You know how to speak to an editor better.
Yeah.
You know how to give more precise feedback to a designer.
Yeah.
Right. So I think from that point of view, because and that's more so a learning for myself, because I feel like I missed the curve on that, and I feel like if people do that, then it really helps when they have to engage with domain experts.
Yeah.
And of course, at the same time, it helps to know how to do it a little bit also, right? I mean, at a base level, we've all gone to a designer with a sketch on a tissue paper or a paper and be like, okay, however bad this is, I want it to look like that.
Yeah.
Imagine if you can elevate that a little bit with now like AI and a little bit of knowing how to do Photoshop, and go to them with a better template.
Yep.
And be like, can you add your own Stardust to this?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
This has been great, Aditya, and there's so much I got to learn through this conversation. I hope to bring you on board again, where perhaps we are in the post-AI world, where AI is such an integral part of your work, work process, and how you're able to take this forward, right? So I would love to know more about that then. Let's reconnect soon, but thanks again for being here. It was such an interesting conversation.
Thank you so much.